Ladies and gentlemen, bonjour. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Mais je ne parle pas français, so I will switch to English, which is much easier for me. Great pleasure to be here in Paris. And before I start, I just want to introduce myself. Originally from Hanover, so in the northern part of Germany. Then I lived a couple of years in the beautiful city of Liverpool, the city of the Beatles. Then went to the east of Germany, to Jena, and now I'm back to the very west, so Aix-la-Chapelle, very close to France. So, and here you see the pictures of the hospitals. So this is Hanover. This is the University Hospital of Liverpool. This is Jena in the east of Germany. In the east we build the most modern types of hospitals in the moment. And this is Aix-la-Chapelle. This is a very special hospital. It's still the largest hospital in Europe, so we have everything under one roof. It reminds you maybe to the Centre Georges Pompidou, and exactly it was built end of 70s, beginning of 80s. And it is already a listed building inside and outside. So it's one of these normal hospitals in Germany. In my department is the Department of Intensive Care Medicine. We have we are looking for surgical and trauma patients, and this includes in total 92 beds. So we have quite a few ICU beds, 64, including 6 burn care unit, and 28 intermediate care beds. And all these nice guys looking after the patients while I'm here. Okay, this is my conflict of interest. So I did some presentations, and I'm a consultant to Edwards and E.P. Braun. But probably my most important conflict of interest this afternoon is that I believe that hemodynamic monitoring is beneficial for the critically ill patient. And I will show you initially really the hard facts, the, I think, more than convincing evidence of the clinical scenario, and coming back that it's also of economic benefit for you and your hospital administration. Maybe you came across the findings of the users trial. Many French ICUs took, France is here, where are we here? France is here. So many French units took part, UK units, but also from other parts of Europe. In total, more than 46,000 patients, and it was an observational 7-day trial. We observed in the perioperative area quite a high a number of deaths, so it was around 4%. We all thought initially it was more than around 2%. 73% of patients did not enter the ICU, and it is really very interesting that the ones who died, that the majority of those never have entered the ICU. So I think we have some sort of a allocation and identification problem in Europe. Obviously, when we talk about hemodynamic monitoring, it's always about the Frank-Starling curve, and we know that we want to be around here in the flat curve, and we can measure anything which shows us the delta in the stroke volume. So is it either SVV or PPV or whatever? That gives us an indication how well we have filled up the patient in order to increase the stroke volume. But obviously, we do not want to overfill him and induce lung edema. There are numerous trials. I brought you an own one. We did recently a multi-center trial. Majority of these hemodynamic optimization trials are single-center trials, and this is obviously some sort of a bias possible when you have a group of convinced colleagues. They always are more likely to find positive results when they investigate their special interest. So therefore, we did at least a multi-center trial of 4 centers who have this sort of bias maybe. and we included 52 high-risk surgical patients, ASA 3 and 4, and we induced for the goal-directed therapy a flow track, and it was an SVV-based algorithm. And we measured post-operative morbidity and length of stay as our outcome results. You see here that following the protocol, we used in the goal-directed therapy, again, more colloids, significantly more colloids than crystalloids, although the complete amount of fluid was completely similar. The outcome variables, we had less complications per patient, and the SOFA score was reduced and the TIS score was reduced as well. So again, optimization of morbidity when you use high-risk surgical patients. To summarize that, I brought you this one, and here this is from a Cochrane database. And if you look at the 28-day mortality out of 31 studies, this was maybe not a significant, but a clear signal of 0.06 with a risk reduction of a relative effect of 0.81. And if you look at the complication reduction, this was highly significant. This was 17 studies and nearly 2,000 patients. And to translate that into words, that means if you use hemodynamic monitoring, you have 13 less complications in 100 patients, 2 to avoid renal impairment, 5 times to avoid respiratory failure, 4 times to avoid post-operative wound infection. This was also true in our multi-center trial. We had no severe wound infection in the treated patients. And another very important issue here is that this is only for a short period of time during the operation and thereafter on the ICU. But if you look at the consequence over time, we have very interesting data. One is a 15-year follow-up of an old study which was published at the time in, I think, 92 of Owen Boyd, one of David Bennett's groups, co-investigators. And you see here over time that if you were in the protocol group here initially in this trial, your survival after 15 years still was better. Having said that, look at the number of patients, 11 and 4 here. This is very, very, well, really not convincing data. It might be just of random. But if you look at this data here, more than 105,000 patients from the veterans database in the States. And here again, after 4,500 days, so very long-term survival. And if you see here, survival after complications was less, and especially in the patients who survived 30 days post-op. Obviously, all those who were really, really sick are then excluded. Still, if you have a single complication in the perioperative area, your long-term survival, even after an elective operation, was significantly and really relevantly reduced. So whatever we do in the OR or post-op on the ICU is of survival importance. Whenever a patient faces a complication, we know that his or her survival will be less good than it could be. Therefore, in the UK, the National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence decided then to recommend that they decided for the Doppler. Personally, I think it doesn't matter what sort of system you use to measure stroke volume or the delta stroke volume, to use it in high-risk surgical patient, or whenever a clinician would consider using invasive cardiovascular monitoring in order to better monitor the patient. And they suggested a really easy algorithm, so to monitor stroke volume, to give a challenge of colloid over 5 minutes, and if you have a stroke volume increase of more than 10%, just repeat this maneuver until this is not the case any longer. then to monitor the stroke volume. Is there then, during the operation or thereafter, a decrease apparent, then repeat the maneuver. This is really doable even if you're alone with a patient, so it's not a complicated research algorithm. It's really an easy, clinically applicable algorithm in my view. But obviously, as usually in life, there are famous buts, there are hurdles. One is really, and this is obviously clear to you, there are amazing barriers really, and they are very difficult to overcome to clinical implementation of these sort of guidelines and algorithms. So some of you might be not familiar. There's no time. There is just too much volume of new information, and this is really true. And maybe I just don't like it. I always did it the old style. Why should I change now with 40x years? And maybe you're not in agreement of your studies. You have a different interpretation. You want more studies. You don't think that this particular patient is the right one, etc., etc. And no cost beneficial. Interestingly enough, by the way, what I'm doing today with you is a very weak behavior change strategy. It is far better if you have on your unit multifaceted interventions, academic detailing. Reminders at the bedside are very important, and believe it or not, local opinion leaders. So you need somebody who at the top who says, here, this is really important. You need really audit and feedback, and last but not least, always money and economic incentive. That might be mostly important for the local opinion leader, because he or she is responsible for the budget. So this is obviously always very difficult, at least in Germany. I must admit I'm not sure how it is organized here in this country, but there are always new tools, they are always more expensive, and you have to convince somebody that this is cost effective. Now, I want to share the last couple of minutes with some current estimation based on the recent literature. This is now about numbers, I'm afraid. There's one example, this trial here, and it looks at the post-operative outcome in more than 2,000 patients. They had gastrointestinal or vascular surgery, and the morbidity rate was 20%. They estimated an extra cost per patient with complication of $17,949 US. There are different studies who investigated in this area. So this was one. And there's another one who even, again, looked at a surgical patient who came up with a higher number of costs, so $13,446 thousand dollars. And we are conservative. We go with the lower one. But if you think about $17,949 US, if you think about, maybe you are aware of the, there was a meta-analysis by Hamilton et al. He's from a Rhodes group in London, and they investigated 22 studies from the perioperative area, and they found that using hemodynamic monitoring perioperatively with a goal-directed therapy reduces the morbidity rate about 71 to 11.2%. So in the investigation here of we just looked in, having 2,250 patients, that would mean between 206 or 297 patients would be protected from post-op complications. If you times 206 patients per $17,949 US, it sums up to quite a high number of total savings, 3.7 million. Or in other words, this divided by 2,250 patients means $1,643 saving per patient. If you do it the higher number, it is even a higher number of savings, obviously. And we published these data, by the way, so Frédéric Michard and myself, in the Blue Book of Jean-Louis Vincent's conference last year, so in 2013. But when you think about it, if you have maybe then 2,000 patients or 5,000 patients in your hospital, and you just making these kind of analysis, you might in the position to convince your administration that that really is a cost-effective issue if you use, I don't know, 150 euros per patient, a high-risk surgical patient, in order to measure stroke volume. And what we did is to make it more easy for you, we make here this a table. So depending really on your morbidity rate, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or 60%, you can have an expected cost reduction between $800 and $7,000. And I think this is very convincing data. There are other investigators looking in the same area. So this was from San Diego in lovely California, looking into 116 academic US hospitals and more than 100,000 patients again. So the American colleagues have always huge databases. And again, what they showed is an expected cost reduction between 500 and nearly 6,000 US dollars. So fairly same numbers, I would say, obviously a little bit depending on the type of surgery, whether it is gastrointestinal, vascular, orthopedic, or urologic patients. So there were older studies, but the new estimations I just shared with you are maybe not as high as it has been in previous days. To be honest, I think this was kind of a, well, very maybe a little bit biased estimation, but these numbers are really with a lot of input and scrutinous analyzed. And even if you are very conservative and you say you save $500 per patient, even that is then highly cost effective in terms of using hemodynamic monitoring in the perioperative area. So I think that there is a robust scientific body of evidence to use now hemodynamic monitoring in the OR and postoperatively. There is a reduction of complications, there is a reduction of cost, but what we really need are development of criteria and standards, and that needs to be done by each of you at your own local environment. And it's not enough to just put a device into a patient. You need to integrate that in an algorithm, in a treatment protocol, even if it's a simple one, but it needs to be followed. Otherwise, you are not, it won't be followed, and then you have no effect, but only extra cost. So hemodynamic optimization in high-risk and critical ill patient, I think it's time to do it. Thank you very much for your attention.